John couldn't be here this evening, so I, Christopher Walken, with this crazy thing that he's going to talk about with words, and I have coffee. It's a latte with coffee and milk, and it's crazy. Okay. That wasn't Christopher Walken, but this is a latte. Good evening and welcome. John Soriano here, and we are going to be talking about NLP patterns for use, or how they are used within the EFT framework. A couple things before we begin. I know it's kind of an off time, 6:30 on a Saturday night here Eastern time. It's about 11:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. So not quite sure what time it is where you are. Not quite sure what time it's going to be when you are able to see this. So good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending. Scheduling is a bit quirky for me these days, which is why it's going on right now. Okay, so I have a latte here, and I am ready to have some fun, as you probably already told, with my Christopher Walken impression. And don't judge me. And I'll probably end up slipping in and out of that unconsciously at some point. It just kind of happens. All right. So before we get into the language pattern, and specifically the language pattern that I'm going to go through brushstroke, is the NLP Meta Model. Because the NLP Meta Model is a critical tool for recovering lost information. Okay, so I'll get more into that in a moment of what that is. But before I do that, I wanted to cover some NLP presuppositions that I think are actually very useful in the NLP, the EFT paradigm. Okay, now the NLP presuppositions basically are, heavy latte, basically are the assumptions that NLP uses in order for them to do what they do, all right? They're not truths necessarily, but they are convenient assumptions. I think they're quite accurate on their face, and there's some in particular that will be useful for you. Now, before I delve into that, housekeeping rule here, if you're watching live and you have a question, just punch it in. If I see it in time, hopefully I will be able to answer it. If you're seeing this on recording, you, I think, could still go under comments and ask a question. I should be notified of it and be able to answer it, or you can just shoot me a message on Facebook. Either way, that's good for me. Okay, so let's start with some NLP presuppositions, okay, that I think are useful in the EFT frame. Now, the first one is, and you've probably heard this before, or maybe you haven't, the map is not the territory. Okay, so for example, if I'm looking at a map of Florida, that's not Florida, right? It's a representation of Florida. It's not the territory, right? Now, also, there's different kinds of maps, right? I could have maps that show me mountains, which you wouldn't have in Florida. Maps that show me rivers, maps that show me county division lines, what have you. So based on my perception of what I want to see, that affects what the map is, right? So Gary Craig was often heard saying to practitioners, you need to get yourself out of the way. In other words, your map doesn't count for squat when it comes to working with somebody else. Your map is irrelevant. You need to get into their map of the world and figure out what their map is, right? One of the ways, the main way you do that, so good. One of the main ways you do that is by listening. All right, and there's all various and sundry things you're going to listen for. You're listening for modality predicates, whether they're talking in visual, auditory, or kinesthetic modes, primarily. But also, the meta model will help you recover parts of their map, of their experience that they are not bringing to the surface. more for that later. But you want to be able to get into the other person's map of the world. Okay, there's a whole huge understanding of things once you can get into somebody else's map of the world. Okay, it's very important. And when in EFT aspects, it's paramount. You need to get into their map of the world. You need to figure out how they are perceiving things and perceiving the world. Okay, very important. Next one, mind and body form a linked system. Okay, NLP was saying this back in the 70s, right? The mind-body connection. Now, we as EFTers, of course, really, really, really know that, right? We know that mind affects body. We know that. We also know that body could affect mind. We know that too. And the tapping actually does, to some degree, work the cybernetic loop in reverse, doesn't it, right? Not to mention meridians and energies and everything like that, but just taking it on a pure physiological level, these trigger points send different signals to the brain than what it expects, so it has to rewire what its perceptions are, right? So we already know that as EFTers, that the mind and body are a linked system, okay? So we can affect what's going on in the mind and thus affect what's going on in the body to some degree. I had posted a question in a couple of the EFT groups the other day on what people thought about most physical illnesses having a mental or emotional component or underlying driver, right? And of course, it was a resounding yes. And the medical community more and more is also acknowledging that. If you're staying in high levels of stress for a long enough amount of time, the body is going to break and something is going to give out, okay? And I have shared in some venues my theories on how I contracted a rare form of cancer. Short Reader's Digest version, I believe my thought patterns created it, all right? And that's just me. I'm not talking about anybody else's experience, but it just was because of the way things all worked out that it just kind of was an aha moment to me. So again, mind and body form a linked system. That's an NLP, and we know that. Okay. Behind every behavior, there is a positive intention and a usefulness for the behavior in a certain context. So that's pretty right. What does that mean? That means, let's say you're dealing with somebody who's getting angry, okay? Now, anger in and of itself just is, we know that, but it's not necessarily a negative, or it's not always a negative, all right? Anger could be a positive in a certain context, okay? If I'm faced with a dangerous situation, fight or flight, and I get angry, it's useful in that context. Getting angry because my pencil isn't in the right place on my desk is not so much. So there's a proper context. So part of EFT when you're working it, using reframes when you're at a certain point in the process, is to start playing with the context and where it might be useful and where it's not, and get rid of it where it's not, right? But a key distinction when you're working with somebody with EFT is if you come at it from that frame that all behavior has a positive intention. Okay, so let's say somebody is having consistent relationship issues, right? They're always getting with somebody who doesn't respect them, who doesn't appreciate them, mistreats them, what have you. But it happens continually. Why? Why would somebody consciously do this to themselves? Well, we know they don't, right? When they're not consciously getting up every morning and say, well, gee, how could I be miserable today? They're not doing that. However, there is something that's giving them a payoff. Something where they are saying, unconsciously, of course, that, hey, this serves a purpose. It's useful to me in some way. Okay. Same thing with people if they're trying to lose weight and they're not. Back in the early days, they used to muscle test. And muscle testing is a really cool way to find out what's going on in the subconscious. And I would muscle test a client, Do you want to lose weight? Yes. And the arm will go whoop down. Well, your subconscious, your unconscious doesn't want to lose weight. Why? What's purpose does it serve? Well, it gets me out of things. So sometimes in an EFT, what do we call that? We call that the tail ender, right? The tail ender is what sticks everything in place. So if you're coming from the frame already that there is a positive intention, i.e., hi, Sylvia. Hi, everybody. I.e. tail enders or payoffs, then we already know that we can look at it in that context that, okay, if I take the payoff and I find a way for them to get the payoff they're looking for in a more positive way, if you come at it from that angle, your EFT is probably going to work a whole lot quicker, right? Because you're going to be able to go for a tail ender first, cut the tail ender because you're looking for the positive intention, cut that, then come and work the rest of it, and you're going to get your results probably a lot faster. Does that make sense? I hope. I would tell everybody nod, but I wouldn't see it. All right. So those are the main ones that I think could be useful. And one other, actually. There's no such thing as failure, only feedback. Okay, now this is one I use all the time, and I deal with it with students all the time. When we're looking at, for example, their grades and I have an F. Now, we've all been through 12, 13 or so years of school, and we've been conditioned that an F is failure, right? F doesn't stand for fantastic, right? But F stands for failure. That's a lie. And I'll tell them that. And they'll look, no, I failed. No, you didn't. What you did was you got a result, period. If you don't like the result, then we need to backtrack and figure out what you did to get that result and change what that is, and then the result changes. So, for example, if I'm dealing with a student and they had a 50 on the test, my first question is, did you study? Now, based on what I'm looking at, I kind of know the answer to that already. And they'll look at me, no. Okay, so what do you guess you have to do to change that result? You have to study. Yeah, well, you have to study effectively, and that's a whole other can of worms. But change what you do up front, you change the result. So when you're dealing with a client with EFT, and a lot of times you're dealing with things and they're feeling like failures, it's a very powerful presupposition to come from to say that there is no such thing as failure, there's only feedback. So these so-called failures that you're dealing with, right, you're from going from job to job, you can't hold a steady job, I'm a failure. No, it's giving you feedback. So what is the feedback we are looking for? What is it telling you? Okay? That'll get you to beliefs that they're holding on to. It'll get you to all kinds of tappable things in the EFT venue. Okay? So those are the presuppositions that I feel are useful in this context. Okay? So let's move on to meat and potatoes, which is the NLP Meta Model. All right. So what is the Meta Model? The NLP Meta Model is the heart and soul of NLP. It are the language patterns that allow someone to get into somebody else's map of the world, number one. And number two, help them to recover things from their map of the world. When we see clients in EFT, we know a lot of times it's like a fishing expedition. You're trying to find out aspects, you're trying to find out things to tap on, all this kind of stuff. Well, the meta model, in my opinion, gets you there quickly and elegantly. Now, is this a strange combination of putting NLP with EFT in a meta model? Not at all. Now, what many of you may know, some of you may not know, Gary Craig, the creator of EFT, was an NLP master practitioner before he created EFT. And when you look at Gary Craig in action on the videos and such, especially if you're NLP trained, like I've done it both. I watched them before I was NLP trained, and then I watched them after. NLP, Bridget, is neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP for short. So watching the videos after I was NLP trained, I'm like, oh my God, look what he's doing. Isn't anybody seeing this? I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy, right? And there's a whole different set of skills that hit you once you're like, oh, I know what he's doing there now. That's pretty slick there, Garrow. So it's not a strange thing in any sense or form. Reframes and stuff are done all the time. But the meta model deals with finding things that the person is not bringing forward, okay? We look at it in two different levels for simplicity's sake. Language, what you say, the words, how you say the words in terms of syntax, things like that, is surface structure, okay? That's what you're able to interact with, okay? Now, surface structure is a representation of deep structure, which is their map, which is what's really going on, which as an EFT practitioner is what you need to target, right? But people will not just come to you and offer up their deep structure. A lot of times they don't know what the deep structure is necessarily or specifically themselves. That's where you come in, and you have to kind of help them find that, right? I was reading some works on Meta Model, and one author in particular had a really interesting point. Language creates the deep structure. Not necessarily is just a representation of the deep structure, but actually creates the deep structure, right? Because when we hear surface structure and deep structure, it almost has kind of a prioritization tone to it, kind of oh, this one's better than that one and whatever, kind of this one's superficial, what have you. But it's not that way. They are looped, so to speak. So language in NLP actually creates the deep structure. Translation, your words create your reality. Where'd you hear that one before, right? That's all around now. But again, NLP's been saying it, not the same exact way, since the 70s. Your language creates your structure. So for example, and the reason they got there was a lot of this in the early days came from something called transformational grammar. And that has a lot to do, again, with wording and syntax and everything else. Syntax is the order of words. So, for example, the dog bit Johnny, same word, those words in a certain sequence are syntax. Or Johnny bit the dog. Same words, different syntax, and it has a different meaning whether you're Johnny or the dog. So that all came about as foundations for the meta model, okay? Your language, your everyday language, your everyday vocabulary paints the picture of your reality, if you think about it, doesn't it? Yes. Yeah, somewhat. So what you tell yourself, you believe, right. But even on more subtle levels than that, for example, something happens and you say to yourself, man, I am just pissed off. Now, if you keep saying I'm pissed off enough, you're going to get really aggravated, as opposed to saying, well, that gets me somewhat tinkled. What? No. But there's no to tinkled as opposed to pissed off. You see the difference? But it also feels different, right? So how we color our lives with our language will lead a lot to what we feel and what we experience. Okay. That all being said, now, the three main structures, I usually count to three. Here we go. Three main structures of the meta model are generalizations, deletions, and distortions. Okay. In other words, in any given conversation, this is happening. In any given communication, this is happening. You're either generalizing things, you're deleting things, or you're distorting things. Okay. We do this all the time. Now, the difference is when you're dealing with a client as an EFT practitioner, If they're deleting a bunch of stuff, you're going nowhere fast. If they're distorting things, you might be tapping on what I would call paper tigers, right? That's not exactly the real deal. If they're generalizing things, you're getting nowhere specific, which again is something counterproductive to EFT. In EFT, we need to get as specific as possible. So if someone's coming at us with a generality, we can't get anywhere with that. We have to chunk down and find out what's driving the generality. Where is the specific in the deep structure that is driving the generality? Okay. Makes sense so far? I hope. Okay. So let's start with distortions. Okay. Distortions are what it sounds like. You're distorting events in terms of your perception and your memory. Okay. You're constructing, you're manufacturing, you're creating, you're manipulating all the data of a specific thing, right? But it is also, if you get to the bottom of distortions, a main driver of what's called a guiding star, right? If we do work with guiding stars with EFT, basically you're taking a huge pin that everything is kind of getting stuck on and you're going to clear it, right? But you can't do that unless you know where the truth is underlying the distortion. Okay, if that makes sense. So under distortions, there's a few subcategories of a distortion. Cognitive distortions. Yes-ish, kind of. I mean, it's very, very similar, but I think it trails off a little bit in its own direction. But yeah, that understanding would get you close. Okay. So the first one under distortions would be mind reading. Okay. Now this is a classic, and this is very common. You think you know what somebody else is thinking, right? We're all mind readers. We all indulge in it. The problem is we all suck at it. You can't do it, right? So if you're dealing with a client in an EFT platform, for example, and they're telling you, well, I have this issue with so-and-so. I just know she doesn't like me. That's a mind read, right? So you have to challenge it. Now, the meta model on a certain level is where you challenge the meta model violations. Okay, you say, you'll ask a question to that to challenge it. Now, the key distinction here, though, is you can't do it to the point of being annoying, and a lot of NLP practitioners do that. They're constantly challenging every single meta model violation, and you can't do that. You just become annoying after a while. So what's the premise of how you do this? You have to have an outcome in mind, right? Why has the client come to you for EFT? What is the outcome, right? Now, I hope as EFT practitioners, you're setting the outcome straight up front, right? Otherwise, there's no way you're going to hit a moving target. So I hope you're becoming quite clear with the person. And if they come in with some kind of generality like, well, I just want to feel better, I hope you're qualifying that enough and challenging that enough to have a very clear and distinct outcome that you're aiming for. Because not only is that going to drive what you're doing EFT-wise, it's going to drive what you're going to do meta model-wise. Okay? Because again, you're not going to challenge every single meta model violation. 12, yeah. And then this is about 15 to 17 meta model violations, depending who you read. But yeah, it's interesting that the numbers are about the same. So in a mind read, if someone comes, I know she doesn't like me, you'd have to challenge that. Okay. Now there's actually two meta model violations in that sentence. Who's she? And that's called a lost performative. Who is she? And we're going to get to that one next. And how do you know? Well, I know she doesn't like me. How do you know that? All right. So I had a client for EFT, and we were kind of a sticking point. We were working on her relationship with her daughter. And we were tapping quite a bit on different and various aspects, and wasn't really getting a whole lot better. And then she said, I just know she disapproves of me. Okay, well, how do you know that? Well, it's just the way she looks at me. Now, this is where it becomes the art of using the meta model, right? Because then you're not, I could have said, well, how is it specifically she's looking at you? Which is annoying. Or then knowing where we're trying to get to in EFT, right? Which is always a core aspect or core aspects. When she said, well, it's the way she looks at me. Well, where have you seen that before? And boom. That's the way my mother looked at me. God, I hated the way she looked at me. Bingo. Now we had something tappable. When was the time that you could remember that mom looked at you that way and gave her the same exact feeling that we were working with the daughter? And bingo, we were able to collapse it, right? Because we knew how to get there. Does that make sense? I hope. So that is mind reading. The next one, the lost performative, it's a value judgment, right? It doesn't specify who's making the judgment or whether something is good or bad, right or wrong. It's just the person who's supposedly performing the action or giving the idea or the belief is not there. So, for example, it's not good to eat like that. Says who? Or how do you know that? Where did you hear that? Who did you hear that from? You see, it's kind of just hanging out in the ether until you hit it down. Why is that good to know? Okay. All men are dogs. Okay. I'll sacrifice myself on the as tribute here for a moment as a male. All men are dogs. Who did you hear that from? My mother. My mother always told me that. Well, what made her say that? Do you know? Well, because dad cheated on me and he left us when I was 5. And do you remember that? Yeah. Well, how did that make you feel? And then here we go, right? Because there's something tied there somewhere energetically, and we're going to start tapping. You see? See how you get there? So it's where are they getting it from? Okay. Not only do we want to know where they're getting it from because it's a tappable thing, but we also want to know if it's valid. Okay. Where'd you get it from? Wikipedia? No. We don't cite Wikipedia. Okay. But I mean, challenge them down. It's like, what are you doing? Don't look at that. Fake news. But you want to know if they're getting it from some kind of valid source or not, right? Because then you could always challenge that later. Does that make sense? Okay. The next one in this category, cause and effect. Cause and effect is a meta violation that basically tells you that A causes B. Okay. You make me angry when you talk like that. What's the violation? Talking like that, whatever that way is, will make me angry. Okay, so when you're dealing with a client with EFT, and they'll say something like that, well, when he talks like that, it makes me angry. They're having a cause and effect relationship there in her head. All right, him talking like that makes her angry. Okay, so again, there's a couple of violations there. One is, what is that? How specifically does he have to talk to get you angry? Well, it is a certain tone in his voice. Okay, well, what about that makes you angry? Well, and then see where the rabbit trail goes. Well, it reminds me of when someone spoke to me like that, when Uncle Charlie spoke to me like that at the family barbecue and embarrassed the bejesus out of me in front of everyone. Ooh, tappable event. But you see how quick we got there, right? Because you challenged the surface level meta violation, and it brought me right back down into the deep structure as to what was missing. What's missing is going to be the gold. There's a reason it's missing. The reason it's missing is because they don't want to consciously deal with it. Okay, so the mind will distort and do all these kinds of things to make it feel better so they don't have to face it directly. But we need them to face it directly to a point, using EFT principles, of course. We don't want to cause pain or damage, right? Re-traumatizing is not our thing. But we need to know what's going on in the deep structure, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, and then you'll just challenge it that way. Okay. Along a similar line is something called complex equivalence. And complex equivalence is about the relationship between two thoughts or ideas. So something means something else, right? A equals B. It's not quite the same as cause and effect. It's a little bit different. So one thing means the other, okay? So I'm dealing with a client for EFT. She's here because of a relationship issue. He always stays out late. He doesn't love me. See the complex equivalence? His staying out late equals he doesn't love me. Now, we got to find where that connection came from. That's your tappable event, all right? Whatever belief and whatever created that belief to link that in a complex equivalence is going to be where you're going to tap once you find out what it is, okay? So how would you challenge that? Okay, well, he's always out late. That means he doesn't love me, okay? How does him being out late mean he doesn't love you? And make them challenge it in their own head and find it, okay? There's got to be a reason why it means that in that equivalence to the client. Once you find out, well, because in my last marriage, my ex stood out late all the time, and it turned out that he was seeing someone having an affair. Okay, now you see how you see where we're going, right? Now you're getting specific. All right, well, do you remember a specific memory from that time when, you found out he was cheating on you because he was staying out late and you finally found out? Yes, and the waterworks will start. But now you have your tappable aspect. You see? So that's how you get there, is by challenging the meta model violations. Okay? Now, the next one is presuppositions. A presupposition, unlike NLP presuppositions somewhat, it's a condition or element in the statement which has to be true in order for the sentence to make sense. Okay? It's an assumption to some degree. All right, so a presupposition statement. For example, we serve healthy, low-fat meals on a sign at a restaurant, right? There's a couple of presuppositions there, right? We serve healthy, low-fat meals. How do you know it's healthy? The presupposition is we know what the criteria is for healthy. Okay. Now, of course, that's one of the big kind of things in advertising that kind of gets you, right? They're throwing a presupposition. Now, here's the thing with meta models, especially when you're dealing with a client, or even if you are on the receiving end from the advertising agencies. If something is missing, okay, pay real close attention to what I'm about to say if you are an EFT practitioner, okay? If something is missing because of a meta model violation, if we don't find out specifically by challenging the violation and getting what's really going on from the client's deep structure, if we don't do that, we are left to fill in the blanks according to our own map. I'm going to say that again. If you don't challenge your client's meta model violations and and in theory, what is missing, you will be forced to fill in the blanks according to your map. That is why communication breaks down so often. Because if I'm speaking to someone and they're throwing meta model violations at me, I'm left to fill in the blanks if I don't challenge. And I hate to use the word challenge. It's just how we describe it in neurolinguistics, and you're not really challenging, like, it's not like that kind of thing, but you have to dig into the violation to find out what's going on from their map. Because if I throw in my map and I fill in the blanks based off of my map, I could be completely off. And then what do we have? We have miscommunication. We have broke down communication. We have failed relationships. We have 50% divorce rates. Okay. That's why. Because we're filling in the blanks based on our own stuff, not theirs. So it is critical, if you are an EFT practitioner, to get to the heart of the violations and find out what the deep structure stuff. Through these few examples already, I'm hoping you see how this works. Okay. So in this case, the presupposition, okay, we serve healthy, low-fat meals. Now, if I don't challenge that and say, well, what do you mean by healthy? What's your criteria for healthy? Mine might be, well, hey, as long as it's under 1,000 calories at a shot, I'm good. Right? Or they'll throw that out to you as a misdirection. Right? Oh, we serve healthy meals. And you're like, yeah, because it's fresh. Yeah. Not knowing what that really means. Right? So I'm going to eat a fresh, healthy salad at Chili's. Okay? Grilled chicken salad at Chili's. You ever do this stuff? What's the name of the website? Eat This, Not That. It'll blow your mind when you throw in and see salads from like Chili's or TGI Fridays, something like that, and you see the sodium content on them or the calorie contact on them, and you're like, that's not really healthy, right? Well, you didn't ask. They said fresh, healthy salad. You assumed you were all on the same page. What they're saying is there's no hamburger in it. But the fat content is probably really close, but you didn't bother to ask, so it was healthy and it's fresh, but it was probably like one of the worst options on the menu, and you would have known, right? Because they're going to let you fill in the blank, right? And it happens with communications all the time, right? So you have to be careful when someone gives you these presuppositions up front and you don't challenge and you don't dig deeper to find out what is their criteria. Okay, isn't it nice to be loved? Well, how do you know you're loved? Okay, that's a whole other thing about strategy and everything else. It's another reason why relationships break down so much. Maybe my criteria for feeling loved is different than my partner's. So what do? Right? But unless you know it yourself, there you go. All right, this is a good cup of latte. So what would you challenge me with? Well, how do you know it's good? I hope you did that. And it is good, by the way. Okay, the next section, generalizations. Love these because you hear them so much. Okay, the generalizations, we do this because we're wired to do this. Okay, what do I mean? Generalizations in life, generally speaking, see what I did there, are useful. Okay, for example, I went on holiday around New Year's, and I had to rent a car. Wasn't my car. Wasn't the same make or model as my car. But I was able to drive it. Why? Because of generalizations. Okay, I know where the brake pedal is, and I know what a gas pedal is. I know what the Prindle is, right? The parking or whatever. And I generalized how I use that in my car to the rental. All right. So I didn't have to sit there with the owner's manual trying to figure out how to drive that car. All right. So in that context, a generalization was useful. Same with doorknobs. All right. I go out and I go to different various and sundry places. It's not the same doorknob, but it's probably going to turn the same way to open 9 times out of 10. It's a useful generalization. Where it gets dangerous is when you apply it to things it really shouldn't be applied to. Okay. So the all, always, every, never, everyone, no one, nobody, those universal quantifiers are generalizations. Okay. Well, everybody knows that. Everybody? Did you know that? I didn't know that. Now, you really want to have a study in meta model violations, generalizations in particular, wait until midterm elections coming in 2018. Wait till any major election cycle. Okay. There were so many meta model and violations, generalizations in particular, going through all the debates and the ads and everything else that my eyes are almost bleeding just watching it. And it was painful. I was just rocking a corner for a while. It was brutal because it's all and every and never. Okay. It always happens to me. Right? If you have an EFT client sitting in front of you, it always happens to me. Okay. Now, I don't know if we didn't get to this part yet, but there's 2 violations there. What's it? And once we find out what it is, it depends on what your definition of it is. Once you find out what it is, were there ever times when that didn't happen to you? Well, okay. Now, because really this is a belief, right? It always happens to me, whatever it is. It always happens to me. That's a belief. So belief change 101. How do you change a belief? You begin changing a belief by creating doubt. How do you create doubt? You get counterexamples. So was there ever a time when that didn't happen to you? Well, yeah. Okay. So, and you go along that line, right? Nobody likes me. That's why I'm here to see you for EFT, because nobody likes me. No one? There's like not a single person that likes you? Well, I don't know. It just feels that way sometimes that nobody likes me. Well, what makes you feel that way? Well, how they treat me. Okay. Well, how specifically are they treating you to make you feel like nobody likes you? Well, it's just that when they do this or they don't talk to me or whatever, and you see how we're going, right? Because I have to get to the bottom of the generalization. I can't tap on even though nobody likes me. That's not going to get us anywhere in EFT. We know that, right? It's the same as, even though I'm angry all the time, and angry. I mean, we know as EFT practitioners, we can't tap on that. We know that. So we have to dig deeper. Generalizations, you have to dig a little bit more, right? Because they're just so broad and you have to really narrow them down. All right. And eventually, though, it will get you to where you need to go in terms of an aspect that you can tap on. Does that make sense? Okay. So every time you hear, yeah, you almost caught me. Whenever you hear all, always, every, never, everyone, no one, nobody, okay, you're dealing with generalizations. Now, the sad part in some instances of all, everys, and nevers and generalizations is there's really nothing underneath. It's just pure air, right? It's fluff, right? So eventually you get to where it just goes because there's nothing supporting it anyways. Oh, well, all those freaking Republicans are the same. I mean, again, my ears would bleed. All? Same as what? What specifically are they the same as? What is it you're comparing them to? Okay. Leave it to my brother. Peeler. Yeah, something like that. Oh, man. All right. Next one. Modal operators. That sounds like a very fancy thing. The modus operandi, the MO, right? Come on, we've seen all the detective shows, right? It refers to a typical method or style of moving through the world, right? A modal operator is a type of adverb that precedes a verb and indicates whether we act out of necessity or possibility. Okay, in other words, because we have to do something or because we want to do something. Okay, modal operator is a big fancy way of showing that those kind of motivational styles are either moving towards or moving away. All right, now why do we need to know that as an EFT practitioner? Because you want to know, first of all, if you know somebody's meta program as to whether they're moving toward or moving away from, it'll help you in creating your reframes later. Okay, I'm jumping a little ahead, but what do I mean? I mean, let's say we've done all we need to do. We've done all this. We've got all here, and everybody's happy. Everybody's loving. Everything. Hey, kumbaya's in the background. The birds are singing. The sun is out. And you want to give them a reframe on how to see things differently. If they're a moving away from person, you don't want to give a reframe that's moving toward, and vice versa. For example, if I'm dealing with a student, I need to motivate a student, and they're moving away from, I can't say, well, don't you want to go to college? Because that's moving toward. And they're going to not care. No. Yeah. All right. Don't you not want to live in a van by the river? It's moving away. All right. Any SNL fans know what that one was? Punch it in now if you know what that one was. All right. So you want to know that, and the modal operator kind of gets you that. So in other words, how would you hear a modal operator violation? Your client comes to you, I know I should get out more. Should? Okay. First of all, who told you need to get out more? Is this something you really want to do? Okay. Shoulds are no good. You know, we get clients in and, you know, they're shoulding all over themselves all the time. All right. We should. We have to. It's not a power place, though, right? So we need to know, okay, I should do this. I have to get to better. First of all, it's a crappy way to frame something, okay? Who wants to have to do something? I don't like that. Do you? I know I don't. So if I catch myself saying, well, I have to go to bed early, you know, each of us has the little one inside us, well, right? I choose to go to bed early so I'll feel refreshed in the morning. It's kind of an Obama thing at the end. I'm refreshed in the morning, right? Different modal operator, all right? So I should, I have to, you have to challenge those, okay? Well, could you do something else? Well, I really should take this job. Okay, say you're dealing with a client that has, you know, that kind of career issue stuff. I really should take this job. Well, do you want to? What would happen if you didn't? See, and then again, there you go. Now you're going to find fears. You're going to find beliefs. You're going to find maybe even identity level stuff. All right. Come on, as EFT practitioners, we know that. The identity stuff is gold. Gold, Jerry, gold. Right. So if you get to the point where I really should do this, well, you know, do you want to? What would happen if you didn't? You know, well, I'd probably, you know, you don't understand. I really, you know, guys like me, we just don't, you know, have to take what we can get. Ooh. So you got a whole bunch of type of stuff there, don't you? Right. But again, you wouldn't know that if you didn't challenge the should. Okay. All right. Let's move on to deletions. Now, we are, as humans, and by the way, I hope you realize that this is, again, really just broad stroke stuff, right? If you really want to dig in deep and stuff, it takes a lot more time than I'm going to have here. Okay, deletions. We are, as humans, deletion creatures, right? We delete things all the time. We have to. If the brain wasn't wired to delete stuff, we'd go stark raving insane in about 20 minutes because we are bombarded by millions of bits of data on a daily basis. So we have to delete. The problem is when we start deleting things and we don't recover them, or we're dealing with someone as a client and we're not helping them recover them, then we're off track, okay? So first one, nominalizations. That's the first category under a deletion. Now, a nominalization are process words or verbs that have been frozen in time, so they've become nouns, okay? An example, in the sentence, and I'll read to you here, the investigation failed to find any evidence to support the claims. Now, the investigation is a noun here, but investigation is actually a verb. It is the action of investigating, okay? So once you take an action and you freeze it into a verb, the person is what? They're stuck, okay? Now, you have just seen a huge insight into somebody's map. If they throw a nominalization out there, they're telling you, without telling you, they're stuck. Isn't that great? Because now you know what to do. All right, so examples, more examples, all right? We are winning the war on terror. Terror is not a noun. Terror is a verb. But now it's become a noun and it's been stuck. Okay? Now, here's the thing. A nominalization has to, the easiest way to get a nominalization down is the wheelbarrow. Okay, Bridget, hon, you can catch it on the link up. I'll be posting it. Don't worry. Have a good night. We call it the wheelbarrow test. If we have a noun, and if that noun cannot be put in the wheelbarrow, then it's not really a noun, it's a nominalization. Okay? So again, for example, going back to the investigation didn't lead to anything. Okay? Investigation, I can't put an investigation in a wheelbarrow. Right? So it's a nominalization. So how do we do that? We have to unstick them. Okay? What do you, like, for example, we're winning the war on terror. Well, what specifically do you mean by terror? Okay. What are terrorful acts, people, whatever? What are you fighting against specifically? Okay. You have to unstick. Okay. The investigation didn't lead anywhere. Okay. Well, how did you perform the act of investigating? You see what I did? I took the noun and I turned it back into a verb where it belongs. Okay. And then I get it back into action. And then the person becomes unstuck. Okay. And then you go through whatever you need to for tapping. All right. Unspecified verbs. We're closing in soon. Unspecified verbs. These are process words that don't specify to a greater or lesser degree what's being referred to. Okay. Something is missing. So I've been trying hard to make more money. Okay. What does that mean? All right. What do, if anybody's still live on here right now, what I want you to do is tell me, type in the comments, I'm trying hard to earn more money. What word do I need to challenge? I don't know if anybody is still alive or not, but if you are, and you're listening to the sound of my voice, type in, what word do I need to challenge there? Trying is the word we need to challenge there. Yeah, Harvey, there you go. Yeah. Trying is the word we need to challenge. What does that mean specifically? Okay. I'm trying hard to earn more money. So the word that we need to challenge, okay, the unspecified verb, right, is trying. How specifically are you trying? Now you're going to find out specifics of what they're doing or what they're not doing, okay? I'm trying hard to be more successful. That's why I'm here to see you. Well, what specifically are you doing? Okay. How specifically are you trying? What is it you're doing? Because guess what? That's going to lead us to tappable things. Okay. All right. Simple deletions. Simple deletions, there's a deletion when we sense that some information is missing. Usually it's the grammar or the syntax that's going to cue you off on that to let you know. Okay. So, for example, it's one of my favorites. That guy is an idiot. Okay. Now, whether you for him, hate him, love him, doesn't matter. But if you ever see most of the commentary about anything written about Trump and media, it's usually something along the lines of that guy's an idiot. Okay. What's the deletion here? So assume we know who that guy is. Okay. And if we didn't, we'd have to do that first. Okay. But let's say we know who the guy is. What is the deletion here? That guy's an idiot. What's the deletion? See if you can type it in. That guy is an idiot. What's the deletion here? Anyone? Harvey, 2 for 2. The deletion is idiot. I don't know what that means in this context. Okay, that guy's an idiot. Well, what do you mean by idiot? What is he doing that's getting you upset? Okay. Idiot is a judgment. Yes, but it's also a deletion because we don't know what they're using as criteria for the judgment yet, right? So once we challenge, then we'll know what the criteria for that judgment is. And then again, that will lead you to where you need to go to tap, right? So, very good, guys. You're catching it. I like it. I'm really hoping you guys get some use out of all this, okay? Clients with you again for relationship issues, okay? My wife, she just doesn't understand. What's the deletion there? My wife just doesn't understand. What's the simple deletion there? My wife doesn't understand. Yep, you got it. Yep. Good, Bridget. Good, Harvey. Good, Karen. Understand is the deletion. Understand what? That I work and I slave and whatever that, But again, you need to get to what that means and flesh out what is being deleted. Because once we get that, then we really know where we're going to have to target for tapping. Okay. Unspecified referential index. Okay, that sounds like an SAT question, right? Basically, all it means is we don't know who's doing the action. So in other words, they say you need to drink 64 ounces of water a day. Okay. They say you need to drink 64 ounces of water a day. Okay. What's the unspecified reference? They say you need to drink 64 ounces of water a day. Where's the fluff word there? What is unspecified? They. Yep. Who's they? Okay. Why do we need to know that? Because we need to know where this stuff is coming from. Because where this stuff is coming from will probably give us something to tap on. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. Politicians just can't be trusted. Now, I know the unspecified referential index there is politicians. Which politicians specifically? This will probably be the only time I'm saying that that's not a violation because all politicians can't be trusted. All right. Last one. Comparative deletions. Okay. You can can tell my political views. Don't encourage them. That's my political view. Okay. Comparative deletion is usually when it's an thing. Okay. So in other words, you can do better than that. What's the comparative deletion here? You can do better than that. What is unspecified there? No, not that. In this case, it's not that. Nope. Better than what? That's what's missing. Well, you could do better than that. Oh, we're 20 times better. Then, right? You hear that one, right? You hear that one in advertising all the time. We're 100% better. And you're like, oh, that's nice. Better than what? Compared to what? Okay. For you sales folks, all right, that's too expensive. Okay. Too expensive compared to what? Right? Because you need to know what the map is. Okay. You could say, well, that's too expensive compared to, my bicycle. But that's my map. It's not your map. I don't know. Well, that's too expensive, compared to a Ferrari. Yeah. All right. But you need to know their map. Okay. So if you have a client who's kind of getting down on themselves and they're saying, well, you know what? I know I should be doing better. You see how important now this distinction is going to be for a client sitting in front of you? You need to be doing better than what? Better than my sister, because my mother said she was always better than me, and everything falls apart, and then you know where you're going. Okay? The slightest distinctions as an EFT practitioner will open the world for you. Okay? It'll give you ways to find things in their map of the world that you can tap on to make dramatic changes for them quicker. Anybody going to challenge me on that? Come on, challenge me. It's going to help you make changes quicker. You really let me get away with that? Okay. No one's going to challenge me. So I'm just going to let it stay out there. Using this meta model is going to enable you to make changes quicker. Yeah, Bridget got me. Okay. Compared to what? Okay. So, but it will enable you to make changes more quickly. And what changes? Oh, Bridget. Oh, I'm on the ropes. Way to go. It will enable you, though, to make changes quicker than you have before, because it'll cut the amount of time you need to get to drill down to where you need to go in order to get specifics for your EFT. Okay. All right. Any questions from anybody? You want to type it in? I'll give like a minute to type it in now if you want. Otherwise, like I said at the beginning, I believe once I post this, you can type it in comments and it'll notify me. Or feel free to just shoot me a message on Facebook. And again, this was just a broad stroke kind of thing. To get really digging into this will take time and practice, which is not within the purview of a Facebook Live. But I hope this was helpful. I hope this was information that, thank you, that you guys found useful, especially if you're an EFT practitioner. I hope it's something you could put in your toolbox. And with that, have a great rest of your weekend, everybody. And I will see you around. Ciao.